Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Chinon, and we're looking at the Baudry 2017 Chinon La Croix. Domaine Bernard Baudry is one of the Chinon appellation's most beloved producers. Based in Cravon-les-Coteaux, the domaine has around 32 hectares of organically farmed vines that are dotted across parcels in the communes of Cravon-les-Coteaux as well as Chinon. And of this, about 29 hectares are planted with Cabernet Franc. Now, what sets this domaine apart from many in the Chinon appellation is their strong focus on single lieu-dit wines and the terroir expressions from these sites and soils. Among these wines are Les Granges and Les Creusot, and these are from different lieux-dits on very distinct terroirs on the alluvial terrace in Cravon-les-Coteaux. Also, we have Les Molières, and this is the newest addition to their lineup of single lieu-dit wines, and this is from a limestone-dominated parcel on the plateau in Chinon. Also, we have Le Clos Guillot, and this is from a lieu-dit on the Premier Côte in the eastern part of the Chinon commune. And then finally, the jewel in the crown, so to speak, is La Croix Boissée. And this is from a special lieu-dit in Cravon-les-Coteaux, and of course, that is the wine that we are looking at today. La Croix Boissée is one of the Chinon appellation's most historic and prized vineyard sites. In fact, it was the first in the appellation to be elevated to special status back in 2018 with the creation of a monograph. And this is an incredible piece of research and writing, and it gets into a ton of detail with regards to the history of the site, the origin of the name, the environmental factors and the terroir that influence the site, the human factors that influence the site as well. It is really an incredible thing to read. Now, in the interest of time, I will touch on a little bit of the history and the terroir with regards to this lieu-dit, but I will supplement this video with a longer form written post that gets into a little bit more detail from the monograph for those that are interested. Many centuries ago, La Croix Boissée in this site was home to a troglodyte hamlet that was situated at the crossroads of many ancient pathways. Now, archaeological research has unearthed evidence of viticultural and winemaking activities through the presence of presses and vats that were carved out of the tuffeau limestone that date to around the Middle Ages. Now, the first mention of La Croix Boissée on a map was dating to the Cassini map of the Kingdom of France from the mid-1700s. After this, a little bit later, we have it mentioned on the Napoleonic register dating to 1832. And then up until the time of the First World War, there were in fact 12 registered inhabitants in this tiny little hamlet. Now, in terms of the name La Croix Boissée, there are two origins to this name. The first is there was a stone cross that was situated in the center of the slope, mid-slope of the lieu-dit, and it marked a resting place for people to stop who were passing through the area on religious pilgrimages. The other origin of the name comes from the boxwood twigs that they would lay down on processions for people to walk over during Easter Sunday celebrations. Now, from a viticultural perspective, today this lieu-dit spans around 17 hectares, but only 13 hectares are planted to vine. And of this, about 10.5 hectares are planted with Cabernet Franc, and there's 2.5 hectares of Chenin Blanc. And the lieu-dit is located in the heart of Cravon-les-Coteaux, and we are on the côte here, and we are on a very pronounced and rather steep south-facing slope. And the elevation of the site ranges from around 50 meters above sea level at the bottom of the slope to about 80 meters above sea level at the top of the slope. And the lieu-dit is set up back from the Vienne River about 2.5 kilometers or so. And we find the Arson forest to the north of the lieu-dit. And this forest protects this vineyard site from the cooler winds that would otherwise come in from the northeast. Now, the slope itself is actually a bit more convex in shape, which is really interesting. And this gives the site really excellent drainage, and it also increases the sun exposure across the entirety of the site, with sunshine being accessed to the site all throughout the day. Now, all of these factors combined make La Croix Boissée a warmer site for the Chinon appellation. Now, if you ever are visiting Chinon, this is definitely a vineyard you should be visiting. It's located, like I said, at the top of the slope. We're at a higher elevation in the region, and you can literally see for miles and miles from the top of the vineyard. You can see the alluvial terrace, you can see the Vienne, you can see the communes that are across the Vienne River as well. And by standing at the top of this site, you really do kind of get a better sense of the terroir landscape of the Chinon appellation. And it is really, like I said, it's a really great thing to check out if you are in Chinon. Now, in terms of soils, there are three main terroir units that we find in this site. First and foremost, at the top of the vineyard, there's a narrow band of the upper Turonian yellow tuffeau chalk. And this is a harder, denser, less porous chalk, and the parcels here can suffer from a little bit of hydric stress in drier years. Now, beneath that, in the upper and middle portions of the site, there's a wider band of the middle Turonian white tuffeau chalk. And this chalk is softer, it's more porous, it actually has pretty good water holding capacity. Now, across these sections, which make up about 2/3 of the vineyard area, in terms of topsoil, the topsoil tends to be more shallow, and we'll find a mix of sandier parcels. There are some parcels that have a silt sand mix, and some parcels that have a touch more clay in them as well. And the parcels also, or the topsoils also tend to be a little bit more on the stonier side. Now, the third terroir unit that we find here is colluvium, and that's located in the southeast corner of the site. And colluvium is essentially eroded materials, eroded yellow tuffeau chalk and white tuffeau chalk that have accumulated here and have been deposited here over millions of years. The topsoil here is a little bit more, it's a little deeper, and we tend to see a little bit more clay in this section of the vineyard mixed with a bit of silt and sand as well. Now, perhaps it would be obvious to point out, but I pointed out anyway, that for a lieu-dit this size, this is not a monopole for Bernard Baudry. That is to say that Bernard Baudry does not have all of the parcels here. So in fact, there are 7 vignerons that have parcels across this lieu-dit. Now, Bernard Baudry, in terms of the domain, they have about 3 hectares here. 2 hectares are Cabernet Franc, and they have about 0.9 hectares of Chenin Blanc planted as well. And their Cabernet Franc vines are planted mid-slope, and their parcels are kind of in the center of the lieu-dit, like dead center in the lieu-dit. And the Cabernet Franc parcels are planted mid-slope. The topsoil there is a little bit deeper, and it's a clay sand mix, and the topsoil is quite stony as well. And we've got about 50 to 80 centimeters of that clay sand mixed topsoil, and then we hit the middle Turonian white tuffeau chalk after that. Well, their parcels, or the vines in their parcels, range in age from around 15 to upwards to 40 years of age. And the domaine acquired these parcels back in 1993. And for the first 3 vintages, this was bottled as the cuvée signature. So that's for 93, 94, and 95. And then starting in the 1996 vintage, that's when they denoted this bottling as La Croix Boissée. Now, from a winemaking perspective, the fruit for this wine was all hand harvested. It was hand sorted, destemmed, and not crushed. And then fermentation was done in cement vats with indigenous yeast, and the maximum fermentation temperature would have hit about 30 degrees Celsius. Now, in terms of extraction techniques, Mathieu will go in and do some brief pumping over, 10 minutes once every other day in terms of the extractions. And the total time on skins is about 3 weeks. Now, after the post-fermentation maceration, the free run wine and the pressed wine, they'll be blended together and aged together in older barrels, and these are smaller barrels coming from Saint-Emilion. And the aging takes place over 2 years, and then that is followed by 9 months in cement tank before the wine is eventually bottled. Now, before I get into the tasting notes for this wine, a couple things to note. The 2017 vintage was a very good vintage in the Chinon region. Warmer, definitely on the drier side. There was a little bit of rain in September, but that did not impact the harvest or the maturity of the Cabernet Franc grapes that were picked during this vintage. And Bernard Baudry, on their website, they kind of mentioned that this is kind of akin to 09 in a way in terms of a vintage. So a nice warm, generous vintage for Cabernet Franc. And as a final note about this wine, I actually did a video on this wine, specifically this 2017 vintage, just a little over 3 years ago now. And I specifically chose to show this wine again because it's had 3 years now of bottle age, and I wanted to kind of revisit it and share some of my thoughts with regards to the evolution of this wine over the last 3 years. So let's get into it. So the nose is very open, very perfumed with a lot of purity. And yeah, such a lovely fragrance. And the fruits are on par with what I remember from 2021 when I did the video on this wine. And the fruits tend to lean more on the red fruit spectrum. And I should note as well, like I've been fortunate enough to have had La Croix Boissée from different vintages a few times over the last few years. And that red fruited note for me is very, very consistent in this wine from year to year. And the smaller red fruits, I'm getting a little bit of lingonberry. There is a touch of raspberry here. There's a little bit of a cranberry note, touch of cherry as well. And the fruits lean a little bit more on the savory side. So there's a little bit of a foresty edge to the fruits. And then the herbals come through and they're really quite beautiful. A little bit of sage, thyme, kind of reminiscent of like autumn herbs. There's a lovely cedar note, like cedar wood, as well as cedar leaves. And there is then just this most gorgeous perfume and spiciness to the nose as well. And I have noted this floral nature to La Croix Boissée for Bernard Baudry each and every vintage that I have encountered it. And it is a very distinct peony type note. So a spicier pink flower. Even here now I'm getting a little bit of like a dried rose petal thing as well. And then there's some gorgeous spice to the nose, like a pepperiness, like green and black peppercorn, maybe a little bit of allspice as well. But yeah, the nose is just absolutely fantastic. Lots of complexity to the nose, lots of layers as well, great depth. It's really, really exciting. And so in terms of the palate, those same kind of snappy red fruits come through as they did on the nose. There's a little bit more of a gorgeous, like sweet cherry note, almost a kirsch-like note to the core, to the very center of this wine, which is really, really lovely. Those savory notes come through as they did on the nose. Now we're also getting into some additional layers here, which is always the best part about a little bit of bottle age with Cabernet Franc. Those layers are coming through as a touch of tobacco. There's a little bit of anise seed, like anise licoricey kind of note as well. A touch of cocoa butter, which may sound a little bit odd to people, but it's almost reminiscent of like white chocolate, but without the sweetness. So that kind of cocoa butter note. There's also a little bit of there's also like a little bit of a Earl Grey tea note, like kind of that note of bergamot that's going in, and it's kind of hovering there in the background. It's really lovely. The acidity on this wine, I'm sure you can tell by just me talking, there's so much acidity on this wine. It's gorgeous, it's vibrant, it's lively, it's energetic, and it's very persistent. And you notice the acidity in the wine like right from beginning to end with regards to the palate experience. The tannins are still firm, There's a fineness to the tannins, like a fine boned kind of nature to the tannins. They do feel like they've kind of relaxed a little bit. While there still is some tension here, this doesn't feel quite as rigid and as tight as what it was 3 years ago, which makes sense. Now, in terms of those tannins, I would say they have a beautiful crushed velvety texture to them. And then there's this nice chalkiness as well on the finish. So this wine has, I would say, a medium plus body, and it has great concentration and a certain weight to it, but it's not dense, it's not rich. There is this lean, ethereal verticality to this wine that is really interesting. What I will note, though, with regards to that weight and that concentration, is I do feel like this wine has put on a little bit of weight in the last 3 years, which is very typical in my experience with regards to tasting some of these limestone tuffeau derived soils, or the wines from these types of soils. Is sometimes in the beginning they can present in a rather lean, tight, austere kind of way, and then with time they kind of fill out a little bit, and this wine has definitely done that, because I checked my notes from 3 years ago, and indeed I noted that the wine felt really lean and really tight, and now it's kind of added a little bit of fat, a little bit of muscle, which is really great. But this is an absolutely stunning wine. It's harmonious. It's got so much poise and balance, and that finish, the finish, it just goes on and on and on, and it's got this lovely chalkiness on the finish, great tension, tons of layers. It's a really stunning wine. When I first started tasting it and making my notes today on it, it was just like one of those moments of like, God, this is good. And it really, you do sense in this wine that it is truly an exceptional terroir, and this bottling is an exceptional one as well. And as I said, I've been fortunate enough to have tried this wine from a few different vintages, old, younger, and everything in between. And it's one of my all-time favorites in the Chinon appellation, and certainly definitely one for the cellar. You can hold on to this baby for a long time. When I was in Chinon back in April, I went to a dinner with Mathieu, and he brought a 1997 Croix Boissée, and it was absolutely stunning, and it had so much life left into it. Like this has oodles of time in terms of its life. So if you have this wine in your cellar, by all means, there's a juiciness to the wine that makes it really approachable in its youth. But at the same time, there's so much structure and concentration here that you can really hold this for decades without any issue. If you do open it on the younger side, I would highly recommend decanting it for a little bit of time, or opening it a bit in advance. But this is definitely one that you can cellar, and I think would impress any number of people that really appreciate age-worthy, complex, layered wines that just have so much personality and balance, and just, yeah, that are just from outstanding terroir. So if you've had La Croix Boissée before, and you've had a particular vintage that you've loved, let me know what you thought of that wine in the comments below. Or of course, if you have another favorite wine from Baudry or another producer in Chinon, let me know what that is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.